Traveling this summer? You're going to try to avoid some tolls in college basketball? Good luck. Welcome into the Hoopscat Pod, powered by Big East Energy. I'm your host, Mark Zanetto. Thank you for being here. Well, I don't know about you guys, but if you're going on vacation this summer, and if you're like me and you have kids, you'll be driving. Unless you're rolling fancy and you have the money to pay for all of your kids to get on a plane, good for you. But for most, Americans, we're going to get in our minivans or our SUVs and fire it up and roll out. And whenever you fire up your car and you turn on your GPS, whether it's in your phone or through your car, there's always an option. You can avoid tolls because you're most likely going to be on highways. But there's also, if you go through, you have to pay, right? In college basketball, the option to avoid a transfer toll doesn't exist. If you want to stay competitive, you got to pay that transfer toll. You just do. And the consequences of that ripple through your team and really reverberate through college basketball. So I'm fired up to talk about this because I've read some really good thought pieces on how to change things, or really just kind of even the Fanta article about how it's a cesspool, and there's really and I love John. I think he's great at what he does. I would call him a national treasure here at Big East Energy. Like, I don't disagree with anything he said, but like what I want to offer up in this podcast today is that the loss of Darius Adams really shouldn't be a worry to UConn fans about how this team will play this coming season. Does it suck to lose? In theory, like it's like a perception loss because you lose a McDonald's All-American and then, you get all these breaking news. UConn loses a top 20 recruit. In reality, Darius was more in like the top 30 range. He definitely peaked early, had some struggles late. They really didn't see him developing the way they thought he was. And honestly, you don't go and get the portal guys that you did if you felt really comfortable with him as an immediate starter, right? So why did he walk away from the program, right? This idea of UConn, which is a team that basically is printing banners at this point, 2 of the last 3. They bring back a ton of continuity from the year before. This is just one kid's choice. But also, there's a bigger price being paid. That's what we're unpacking today. So, as we just mentioned, Darius Adams, McDonald's All-American, kind of a silky smooth kid as far as like his handle. He has a knack for really being on the ball, even a combo, off the ball. He was trying to make that transition, but he was doing a decent job of it. I've watched some of his film. He makes people look silly at times. He's going to be a really good player. He's a Jersey kid. He's competitive. So obviously he commits to UConn, ready to roll for Dan Hurley. I think he did an interview with our buddy Jared Kotler talking about his, his want to come to UConn and Hurley and all that. But Adams was supposed to be a part of that, right? Supposed to be a part of this chase for maybe a third out of the last 4 years in titles. But then the backcourt got crowded. Then we started to see the transfer portal. Pay this toll. Silas Damari Jr., Malachi Smith, 2 proven guards who can flat out play. And those guys, along with already entrenched solo ball, a future All-American, an entrenched star. Then you have Braylon Mullins, the freshman that has the most potential and upside, most likely a one and done, a guy that they were committed to either starting or playing starters minutes. And then you have Jacob Furphy, who we did an interview with, which will be out later today, an international wing, big, strong upside, and suddenly there's no room in the inn. And for a kid like Adams, that's a problem, right? He's not one and done. He's not Nate Ament, who just went to Tennessee, or like a 7'3" freak who maybe isn't ready for the NBA, but looks at it as, but they look at him and say, who cares? We can develop him whether he plays a ton at UConn or not. He's currently not projected as a first-round NBA talent for a freshman. And for a freshman, playing time is like oxygen. I mean, he needs those minutes to develop. And at UConn, with that stacked backcourt, those minutes were just going to be scarce. So he makes a call, him and his team, probably most likely, led by his father and his mother. They decommit, they reopen the recruitment. Good for them. Go be an immediate impact player someplace else. All the love and respect. I think it's a calculated move. I think it's a great business decision on his part. And it's more about that than really kind of what it used to be, which is you go to the school that you want, they want you. Maybe you start right away, maybe you don't, but there's like this progression. And that's just not the world anymore. So it was amicable. Adams isn't dunking on the staff, nor is the staff firing out, silly social media posts. I've seen about 95% positive reaction from Husky Nation. I do see a 5% that is kind of just the 5% that does stupid shit the whole time. They're the same trolls that will still bug me about Big 12 and stuff like that. And if I've ever made a mistake before, which I'm sure there'll be many, and which I've had in the past, and there'll be many more. But for the most part, the drama, there is no drama. It's just the people that like to continue to keep it going. But here's where this all hits me. Love that he bet on himself. But back in the day, a kid like Adams might have stayed, fought for his spot, learned from the vets. Those days, they're fading fast. My good friend, will become a good friend, Peter Gilmore, who, if you guys didn't know, I write and have a Substack, Hoops Capital of the World. Go check it out. Subscribe. Would love to have your input there and really kind of understand, because that's what this is coming from. I wrote an article on Easter, and Peter put a comment that I thought he completely nailed it. He said Adams didn't want to be this year's Ahmad Noel, and if you don't know Noel, he was a near 5-star recruit. He had his stepfather on. We had him on the show when I was at Locked On. There was a lot of hype around him, myself included. Thought he was going to play a ton. There was all of that was talked about, and I think the staff really thought he was going to play a ton. Things didn't work out. He got hurt. Now he's at VCU, probably making less money. There's a little bit less spotlight there. So, and I think he's going to do really well there. But the reality is UConn's a 5-star program, and now it's a portal-driven world. And it got me wondering what that means for the game. And we're going to continue talking about that and, trusting this coaching staff about how there's really nothing wrong with the product of college basketball, but the mechanisms behind college basketball are the issue, and the lack of leadership right now, and the really lack of marketing the game that truly is more than just 3 or 4 weeks in March to April. So we're going to hit the pause button on Darius and his decision. I think it was the right move. I don't think he should have stayed. But if you differ, put your comments in the YouTube section. Subscribe to Hoops Capital of the World Substack. Let's keep this conversation rolling. We'll be back after the break. And you're back on the Hoops Cap Pod with your host, Mark Zanetto. Fresh off Easter weekend. I hope everyone had a nice, couple days spending with family, maybe having some good food. I saw yesterday was my daughter turned 7 months. So that was a beautiful thing. It was National Kielbasa Day, and I think 5 or 7% of my bloodline is Polish, and we used to love Polish kielbasa in Meriden, Filipek's kielbasa, Chapika. I don't think I've ever had Chapika, at least not that I was aware of. But I definitely had my share of kielbasa when I lived in Connecticut. So if you're in Connecticut and you're celebrating and you have leftover kielbasa, I feel jealous, and I would like to have some. So all the best there. Definitely shout out to Filipek's, wonderful family, and the kielbasa that they made and still make over the years here in Meriden, Connecticut, where it was second to none, in my opinion. All right, back to the show. Look, this is not something that happens every day, but this is part of just kind of college basketball as a whole. I know that for some people, the perception of this, like that it should sting or losing a kid, never feels good. And honestly, the behind the scenes stuff, like I think the staff probably is taking this harder than the fans should, and as they should, because you spend anybody that runs their own business or takes pride in the relationships that they create would feel certain type of way about someone leaving, right? Whether it's amicable or not. So I don't know who led the recruitment, whether it was Kamani or Luke, but whoever did, you kind of feel like you're losing, I want to say a relative, but someone that you got close to, that you wasted a lot of energy, maybe not wasted is the wrong word, but maybe that you spent a lot of time and effort, and maybe you feel like that energy was wasted. Because I don't think anybody would fault anybody for wanting to move on or decommit from a place that they felt like they weren't going to play. But like I said, there's a price to all this movement, and something I've been calling the transfer toll. It's tied to why kids don't stick around to learn or develop anymore. And we're not spelling it out just yet, but I think you feel it coming. And if you're just joining us, obviously I write for the Hoops Capital of the World Substack. It's something I own. Check it out, maybe subscribe, and let's keep talking hoops, even off YouTube, in the written word. If you like to read articles, I feel like sometimes my best work is there. So feel free to check that out. So losing Adams hurts, likely more to the staff, but you got Solo. We have all the folks that we just mentioned. We're still waiting on Alex Caravan's decision. He had a press conference at his camp where he talked about, things are happening. Ooh, talk about indigestion. Maybe I did have some kielbasa over the weekend. No, I think what Alex kind of showed us is, I think I honestly, I had a conversation with a buddy of mine who's a big UConn fan and is actually pretty connected into the program. It almost felt like he looked like he was going to leave. Or that's the feeling I got listening to his, press conference or media availability with guys like Dave Borges and Joe Arruda and others on the beat in Connecticut. And if Alex doesn't come back, I know that they're looking at a couple other options. We talked about this last week. Definitely confirmed that they are looking at Darian Williams. I said Grant Williams on the podcast. My dumb brain confuses the two. They look like brothers. They look exactly alike. And two, they kind of play a similar game. So I definitely felt like I probably mixed those two together. But anyway, Darian Williams, the Texas Tech transfer, they're definitely in on him. But they're monitoring it because they're playing this wait and see game with Alex, right? And listen, Alex, take as much time as you want, dude. Like I'm not one of these people that he's hijacking this and he's holding these guys hostage. Nope. This is just the price you pay when you have a program like this. But I also don't think that the Hurley and the staff really can wait to continue to. I think they have to act as if Alex is leaving and then be surprised if he's coming back. That's the way I would do it. But hey, I'm not them. And Dan Hurley is the genius of this. So, and Luke and Kamani, Tom, Mike Nardi still hasn't been announced, but I have confirmed through some really quality sources. I know people are going to laugh at that. Some people think that I don't have the sources that I have, but since this Big East venture has come about, the types of people, the quality of our sources has gone up. And if you don't believe that, then over time, I guess you'll have to trust but verify, as Ronald Reagan used to say. So, that's what we're talking about. Tom Moore is likely going to be moving into a full-time GM role. He's been doing that pretty much double duty. Love Coach Moore. I think Mike Nardi would be an incredible add to the coaching staff, especially in this world. He's got ties to Jay Wright, and Jay and Dan are really close. I know the Villanova stuff is, an interesting one because it's a rival, but Villanova's got to get back to where they need to be before we can start talking about rivalry again, right? Even though they beat us last year. So, but look, the transfer toll is really more about when you recruit a large class like Dan did, basically 4 freshmen, the same way he did with Steph Castle's class. He's been able to retain most of it. Lost Youssef. The class before with Liam goes pro. You lose basically the rest of the freshmen. You lose Isaiah. You lose Ahmad Noel. So whenever you bring in guys, it makes the freshmen go, well, why am I here? And some older fans and some fans that are not really ready to let go of the old ways are always going to look at that as soft or they're uncompetitive. But the reality is it's a money game now. And that also makes people uncomfortable. But you got to talk about that. Like, these guys get paid a lot of money to go play for UConn. And maybe they don't get paid millions of dollars and everyone is rolling around with seven figures, but the average NIL for these guys is more than most people make in salary at UConn. I mean, in Connecticut as a whole, doing whatever they do, whether they're in some type of trade, whether they're in education or finance or a firefighter or a cop or whoever, they're making more money than you to go play basketball. And I think some people get pissed off at that. And I think people sometimes have a right to be upset about that, because in the grand scheme of things, should that be the case? No, but that's the reality. So we can deal in reality, or we can deal in dreamland of this shouldn't be the way it is, but it is, right? The bottom line is, as far as the basketball is concerned, UConn is still in great shape. They have absolutely all the resources they need right now to make a run at a national championship. Do they have holes? Are they completely airtight or bulletproof, as Dan likes to call it? No. But the portal closes tomorrow, I believe. And just because the portal closes doesn't mean that there won't be action, because there's still like 400 players in the portal that need to go someplace. And Dan likes to be around 13 players. Maybe, I don't think he's going to go above that. They can have up to 15. You need 11 to be able to practice. It's illegal to not. So they have a partial qualifier in their walk-on, Diaby. And then they have 9, 10 under scholarship / NIL in that world. So technically, I guess they could, but they're still waiting on Alex. They definitely have their feelers in on Darian Williams. I know Stojakovic is still kind of a pipe dream. Same with a guy like Wilkins, but there's a lot of talent still in this portal. So if Alex goes, I trust this staff that they're going to bring in a player similar. And even though Darius Williams, or Darian Williams, who is shorter than Alex, plays a little different game. I was having this conversation with a UConn guy over the weekend that, in a way, he would be the perfect Alex Garabin replacement. Not because he's as good not because of maybe his pedigree, but the leadership skills that he has, the ability to stretch the floor, physicality, all of that, verbal communication. He's a bigger personality. I think he would fit. All right. I want to talk about what I wrote in my article was ways that you can kind of tone down all of this chaotic, not necessarily the portal spending, but in my proposal of how I would fix college basketball's off season. We're going to talk about that coming up. There is a cap, and we're going to talk about everything. My go-to fixes, I guess you could call it, after the break. All right, you're back on the Hoops Cat Pod with your host here, Mark Zanetto. We are powered by Big East Energy on the Big East Energy Network. All right, look. Darius Adams decommits, sucks. Got a bunch of great guys in the portal, awesome. Trust the staff, whether Alex comes back or not. They got things in the works. We got people monitoring that as we speak. But if we're going to talk about, like, when all of this stuff goes on and people are posting on Facebook or X or other social media, and they're like, the college basketball is not the same. There's nothing wrong with the game. The physical game is great. But there are things that need to be done. We had all 4 number 1 seeds in the tournament this year, and that's not something that is, there's nothing wrong with that, obviously, but it's not something that happens every year, because you have, let's just say, equal footing. So let's start talking about the NIL stuff. I propose that there's a cap, and I threw out a number, 12 million for a 15-man roster. Most of the big time schools are going to spend all 12 million of that, but you don't have to. If you're not Alabama, Kentucky, or UConn, good luck keeping up, because 12 million is going to turn into 25 million. 25 million is going to turn into 50 million. And then where does it end? I think that's the biggest thing. And I personally don't care. It's not my money, but I'm talking about if we want to rein in what this is. The whole point of NIL was for people, for college kids to make money off of their name, image, and likeness, not to be pay for play, but it's become pay for play. Cool. We're here now. I joked around that, like, at some point we're going to end up having massive lawsuits all over the place. A really good fan of the show mentioned, like, can Adama Sanogo come back for one more year? And they're like, well, no, he's out of eligibility. He plays professional basketball. Well, you could argue that college is professional now too. So, like, stuff like that. And I joked in my article on Substack that I'm 43. I technically have 1 year of athletic eligibility to play college sports. What if I took some kind of serum that's makes me into a super basketball player, and I'm out there looking like Jason Williams of White Chocolate from circa 2000 2001? How insane would that be if, like, a 43-year-old, like, aging hooper, not just me, just anyone, could play basketball in college? Because you're getting to the point where kids are getting older. Chad Baker-Mazzaro is trying to get one more year of eligibility. He's 25 going on 26. So, like, I don't have a problem with it how old kids are, because who's to say? Who's to say that's ridiculous? But it can start to get ridiculous when an old bald guy like myself could end up playing college basketball for a lower level or wherever. So I just don't want it to become a circus, is really kind of what I think most people are trying to stop. But so if you cap the money at 12 and you go to that 5 year of eligibility, I have no problem with that, because if you have older players, it means people want to stick around and play college basketball longer. That's fine too. But then you have to have contract accountability. Players should sign deals from 1 to 4 years. 1 year contracts are for, like, the elite talents, like the Nate Iments who just went to Tennessee, or the Cooper Flags, or the Leah McNeelys. They sign their 1 year and they're locked. If they decommit, a la Darius Adams, they owe money back to the school, especially if they've taken money right out of the gates. If they haven't, then it's a wash and everybody leaves. Okay? If you are a mid-major player or just a player that's trying to develop, you can sign a 2-year deal all the way up to 4, right? Remember, we're going to a 5-year scale anyway. So if you sign a 4-year deal and you spend 4 years at one school and you want to transfer, you can, because you have your 5th year of eligibility. It's not a grad transfer year. It's just a 5th year of eligibility, because that's what the NCAA is going to anyway. This is where I think it gets really interesting. And as far as paying the transfer toll, like we talked about, if you're a team in conference, St. John's, I'm talking to you, and I don't have a problem with this. I know some teams do and some fan bases do. Everyone poaches, everyone tampers through some element, right? It could be direct, could be indirect. But if you poach in conference, you pay a conference kicker. So, like, I don't think Naheem Alim goes to St. John's if Patino and his boys had to pay UConn like a $500,000 conference kicker. That's what I've been calling it. Because if you did, it's going to be a player like Steph Castle, right? That's who you pay the conference kicker for. You pay like $1 million to UConn to take their best player. Okay. If that's what the player wants, then that's what it would take as far as, like, a transfer fee. And then I feel like we're kind of getting into that, like, soccer world where, like, you can have a transfer fee for a player to go in conference. It really would prevent, if you have a $12 million cap, you're not spending $1 million because to grab a guy in conference. You're going to go get somebody else, right? And then conversely on that, mid-majors, to protect the mid-major world, the Cinderellas that we love to get to Sweet 16s and Final Fours, the Loyolas of the world, before they were in the Big East, the Butlers of the world, the Creightons of the world, those guys. Now, obviously, much bigger programs, but mostly talking about, like, Quinnipiac. Like, Amari Monroe was the MAC Player of the Year. He didn't go anywhere, but he got big-time offers. his destination was likely going to be Rutgers. Talked about Steve Peichel being one of his, like, was so genuine that that's where he was going to go, but he decided to stay back at Quinnipiac. Very rare. But if you're Rutgers in the future under my plan, and Quinnipiac has a valuation of what this player is worth, and maybe they can't pay it, but I think I saw his valuation somewhere between $900,000 and $1 million. If you're Rutgers and you want Amari Monroe, you have to pay his evaluation fee to Quinnipiac plus what he is actually worth. So you got to double it. Okay. That would discourage power programs from treating smaller schools like a feeder system, because it's not fair to the Quinnipiacs, to anybody in the SoCon here locally, to UNCG or High Point, to develop these fantastic players for them to just go off and play at the highest level, because their coaches put the blood, sweat, and tears into developing this kid, and then you just get to reap the benefits. That makes zero sense. And if that happens, people should be compensated for their efforts. And it goes directly into the athletic coffers. And then seriously, $1 million at the SoCon or the MAC level could fund literally the entire team. So it's not small potatoes when you think about if there is a cap, $12 million for 15 players. So I think what that would do is it would keep the big players would still go, like the Dalton Connects, who was at Northern Colorado. The kid that was at Tennessee last year, Chaz Lanier, played at Northern Florida. Those guys are still going to go. Oscar, I think it's Oscar Clough, who went from South Dakota State. I know he's at either Creighton or Iowa. I can't remember. But these guys are going to go anyway. But if you have to pay for the transfer fee, big clubs are going to gladly do that. But they're not going to steal the sixth man of the year from the Horizon League for $500K, because they have to pay another $500K to said team. That guy's going to stay. Okay. And if he wants to transfer, then maybe he takes less NIL so that the fee isn't as big. And I know that may feel a little restrictive to certain players, and that's fine. But I really do feel like there has to be some sort of compensation. Maybe it's not as egregious, but you cannot just pick and choose and take the feeder programs. Like Central Connecticut State should not be a feeder program for UConn. Sorry. You just can't take Coach Seller's players unless you pay for it. So, and then the last thing I said is, if a $12 million cap for 15 players isn't enough, and we're getting dark money back into the college basketball world, you need to adhere to this, or you're done. Like literally, if you're caught funneling dark money to cheat the cap, you face the ultimate penalty. No exceptions, no anything. Okay. Programs caught, and there'd be levels to it, right? Just like you had NCAA violations of smaller kind, you get a slap on the wrist, whatever. But if you're caught literally giving money to players that are in the cap, then you have the death penalty for your program. Sorry. That I know it may be harsh, but I'd be done with it, because if $12 million isn't enough to fund a college basketball team, then we have a larger problem as a whole. It's 15 players tops. Likely it's going to be like 13 or 14. So you literally could give every player $1 million if you wanted to do it that way and be good. 12 players, 12 for 12. I mean, come on. These ideas aren't perfect, but it's a start. I do think that some of this stuff could easily be implemented. Some of it would have layers to it. So let me know what you think on YouTube. Subscribe to Hoops Capital of the World Substack. Subscribe to Big East Energy Network. We really appreciate you guys. Don't worry about the Darius Adams stuff. He's great. We're great. Yeah. And I feel like, we're heading in the right direction with UConn basketball. Got a bunch of big guards. Didn't even mention Eric Riva. Going to be a really good stretch four for us. So anyway, make sure you check out later this afternoon. We'll have an interview with, or actually tomorrow, an interview with Jacob Furphy. The audio is great. The video is a little tough because he's in Tasmania, and he's way ahead of us. So be patient with that. But I feel like I feel like it went great, and I feel like you guys are going to love them. All right. This has been another episode of the Hoops Cap Pod, powered by Big East Energy. We're out.